got Omar El-Takrori here with me in the studio. You've probably seen him on Think Media. You've probably seen him at, YouTube and his podcast. And if you're in Vegas, you've probably seen him at City Life.
I started in video over 15 years ago. I probably, I don't know, maybe had like around 30,000 followers on Instagram.
Right.
When I started the podcast, and now I have 96,000 at the time of shooting this. What I didn't know is that it was gonna make being consistent easier, because like every conversation we get anywhere between 5 to 12 vertical clips. What I didn't realize is that also I didn't realize that people were gonna meet me on the podcast. There are some people that didn't know me at Think Media, but because I started a podcast, it showed up on their feed. They watched it. They love me. They follow me on Instagram. Wow. And they joined my coaching program. It was a podcast. And what I also didn't know was just by associating yourself with individuals, because when a person doesn't know who somebody is, but then they learn who they are from the conversation, and you do that over time, it's like, whoa, like by association, my brand has gotten a facelift.
Welcome to another episode here at the Trailblazers Talk podcast. This episode is special. This guy has inspired many people to create podcasts, to level up their setup when it comes to video. You've probably seen him on Think Media. You've probably seen him at, YouTube and his podcast. And if you're in Vegas, you've probably seen him at City Light. I got Omar El-Takrori here with me in the studio. Look, if you're looking to level up your video setup, your podcast, and just take your presence to the next level, this is the podcast for you. And Omar, welcome to the show.
Dude, honored to be here, and I'm grateful. Man. Just cool to see the whole operation just level up.
Yeah, bro.
Yeah, I think people don't realize that in faith you sign the lease on this spot.
Yeah.
And not knowing what the full picture would look like, but it's crazy how how long ago was that?
Dude, this was October last year.
Yeah. Okay, so 6 months or so, and just to see that you got staff and it's an operation. It's crazy.
No, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I think just watching your journey this last 6 months just keeps us dude, we gotta improve, we gotta get our videos dialed in. It's just been such inspiration, man, just to see you kill it and create and show up for people the way you're showing up.
Dude, I appreciate that.
Yeah, so I'm just curious, man, why the video angle? How did you go from this video angle, the video department? How did you end up in this angle?
Yeah, I started in video over 15 years ago. The elective I chose in high school was broadcast journalism.
Oh, was it? So you've been doing this for a minute.
So I've been doing it for a minute.
Yeah.
I know that's what people sense, and it's just what they don't know. So maybe they think I'm just potentially really good at what I do, which might be the case, or I'm really good at communicating, which might be the case. But all that is stacked on top of just the 20,000 hours of just being in the realm of creating video from so many different angles. Because it started with just the school making fun commercials, and then it went into being a creative director at a church for about 3.5 years, and learning how video can move people to do something. And then starting an agency. I started an agency in 2016 and started doing video for businesses and seeing how the videos were making their businesses grow, and then getting the opportunity to then teach video for the season I was at Think Media, where it put me in a position to teach it. And then now here we are at the time of filming this, and it's just video is a form of communication that majority of the world needs to learn and implement. Whether it doesn't matter if you're just in business,
right?
You might be a minister, you might have a nonprofit.
Right.
It doesn't matter what it is. That video is a form of communication. I always like to say it's kind of the newest language.
Right.
We no longer teach, or they don't teach cursive in school anymore. They actually stopped teaching it.
Really?
And I actually think it would be wise to start teaching the skill of video and understanding the basics. There's some basics to understand, but when you get past the production value, then it's about the content value.
Right.
And so they both have to make sense.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
So what do you think are the basics of doing video? Where do you start?
No, it's great. I feel like what I like to teach is this framework. Every time I make a video, I have a mental checklist that I go through, and maybe it's not so mental for new beginners, but it can become in your mind. But it's the acronym ALVIS, ALVS. Alvis. Okay. And the first thing is audio. Making sure that your audio is clear. Wow. It's not distorted. It doesn't sound like you're far away. It's actually funny how audio can make somebody feel like you're very close to them. It's actually not the video angle. Like if your face is big on my Instagram feed, yeah, you're gonna be like close, but how it sounds is actually gonna create the intimacy.
Wow, you wouldn't think that audio should come first. I would think it come last.
Yeah, and that's the funny that I mean, people think they need to buy the camera first, but no. Like, start with good audio, and honestly, if you're using your smartphone and you're at arm's length distance, you're good. But when you start like going further away, or when there's exterior noises, you need to take that into consideration, and you also need to care about the experience of the person that's consuming your content. And if you make somebody work to consume your content, they're not going to be attracted to it. And so, dialing in your audio first and foremost, I believe, is step number one. Number two, L, is lighting. So making sure that whatever is the brightest light is typically the light lighting your face.
Okay.
Don't have a window behind you. Put the window in front of you. You know, you don't need to buy an expensive light. You just need to make sure that your source of light, or they call it, like in the industry word, is your key light. The light lighting your face.
Okay.
Is making you stand out from the background. You don't want to blend in. And if you have a good light, it'll make your phone look more higher quality. When you put the work, you know, you take most of the lighting work off the camera, it actually makes the camera look good. Doesn't matter what camera you use, whether a webcam, your smartphone, or an actual expensive camera.
Wow.
But this is why people sometimes ask me on my stories, dude, what camera are you using?
Right.
I'm using my wide angle lens on my phone.
Really? Is most of your videos shot on your phone?
I would say a good percentage of it, but you don't see a big disconnect when I do use my phone, because when I am using my phone,
you use the same elements.
I make sure, sure that the sun is out and I'm in a well lit environment, you know.
Wow.
Or if there is a light, I'm gonna just stand in front of the light and then shoot that clip or what have you. And then the next thing is visual and video. So this is like, how does it look overall? Like, is there anything distracting in the shot? You know, if you looked at your video as a photo, how would you judge it? You know, and there's so much that goes into that, just even from the colors you wear. Like, I intentionally put on this blue shirt because I saw that the background's more warm, and if I have a blue shirt on against this warm color, it actually is on the opposite end of the color spectrum.
Wow.
You know, blue and orange.
Yeah.
And so this is more pleasing to the eye than if I just wore red, white, or whatever. You know?
Wow.
And then also, like, I think when it's time, when you get there, it's like, no, dude, I want a camera setup, because I never want what I teach as far as gear goes to lose people. That's why I try to teach it from a principle standpoint and not a, you know, theory standpoint. And so when you're ready to buy a camera, chances are is you're gonna buy a camera that you don't buy the lens that comes with it. This is called a kit lens. A lot of people do that, and then they're like, dude, it doesn't look like your video still, but I bought the camera you recommended. Well, it's because the lens you're using is not going to give you the look you're going for. Gotcha. The lens gives you the look. So it's actually more important that you invest in a good lens from the get-go as opposed to a great camera.
Right. So what is like a good, like, because I get asked all the time from like different entrepreneurs, like, oh, dude, I use a FX30, and they look at the price and go, dang, that's pretty high. Like, although I don't think it's high, but like, what do you think is a good starting like lens and camera?
No, great question. I think if you're like sub 1,000, you know, getting a Sony ZV-E10. ZV-E10,
a little tiny one.
Little tiny one.
Yeah.
It's not. No, it's not. It doesn't. It still has an interchangeable lens.
Oh, does it?
But I would say get the Sigma 16mm lens with that camera.
Okay.
And you're gonna be under. You should be right around $1,000.
Really?
If you want to be even under that, you know, then potentially at that point get a really good light. You know, if you don't have a good light yet, or you can get the Sony ZV-1, which is a point and shoot camera. It'll look better than your smartphone. But it doesn't have
interchangeable lenses.
It doesn't have interchangeable lenses. And then you're going to run the risk of having to bite again.
Yeah.
So that's what's tough. It's like, tell me what your plan is before you actually want to just, Omar, what camera should I buy? Because if you're like, I want to shoot podcasts, I wouldn't tell you to buy a ZV-E10 because that camera overheats. I would tell you, do you want to run the risk of a whole conversation being compromised because you cheaped out on equipment, and then you're going to have to upgrade eventually? Okay, then tell me what I should buy. Because now I just revealed that like the pain of buying something cheap might, you know, cost me something later on, and you're going to want to upgrade. But dude, I absolutely love the FX30.
Yeah.
It's the camera that I like. I don't even recommend a camera that's better than it because you don't need a camera that's better than the Sony FX30. There's built-in fans, so it won't overheat. There's a plug-in, so most people who want a podcast mic can plug directly into it. If you don't want to do that, you don't have to buy it, and you can save like $400 by not buying the one with the XLR
I think they're on
plug-in.
sale actually for
They were like $2,000 for a little bit,
Yeah,
but I
yeah.
just looked the other day because we're buying another one for the church.
Yeah.
And it's back to 2,200.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. So
Okay.
I mean, sometimes
it's
you could
still
jump-
a
yeah.
great price for.
And then I would still get that Sigma 16 millimeter lens if I'm going to do general content by myself. If you want the ability to zoom in and out, that that you can get like it's called a Sigma, I believe 18 to 50 millimeter lens.
Okay.
But it won't give you that much of a blurry background, and that's what people want.
Right.
And so people always want like to save money,
But want
and
the
yet
best.
and yet be convenient and want the best.
Yeah.
And if the more convenient you go, the more cheaper it can get or compromise the quality. So convenience and quality are like on this scale. And if you want convenience and quality, you are gonna pay. But if you want convenience, you're gonna get have a drop in quality. Like we were talking, I was like, "Are you gonna switch it in real time?" And you're like, "No." Well, because if you switch it in real time, it'd be very convenient for the
But
process.
it'd be compromised.
But you
quality.
bought a 4K camera and
Yeah.
now you're putting out a 1080 image. So
Yeah.
so what's the workaround? Well, it's not as convenient, but I use AI to cut my podcast.
Yeah.
And if you guys could too, and that's a way that you can leverage AI to keep the quality
Yeah.
and the convenience there.
Yeah.
But there's just that it's a principle. Again, I like teaching principles. So that's V is video.
Okay.
And then S is kind of your studio or your setup. And sometimes it's a webcam setup or a Zoom call setup. Sometimes it's a podcast setup. Sometimes it's talking head. Sometimes you're doing vertical videos. So the setup piece is dependent on the type of videos you're looking to create.
Right. And do you recommend having different setups per like podcast or talking head, or like do you recommend having different environments or using the same one?
No, I mean it just kind of goes back to like the convenience thing. I mean, I personally have 3 cameras at my studio that I use for my podcast, and then I would enlist one of them to do my Zoom calls. It's that wide angle camera that I use. I just put it in front of the desk, and then you could with a USB cable, which is really nice. Use the audio and video feed from it.
Yeah.
And then my Zoom calls look amazing. And so I mean, no, I love having, like, if you have one good setup that like allows you to accomplish a lot, I feel like that's where most people are at.
Got you.
Yeah.
And do you feel like, because I know you dial in people's setups all the time.
Yeah.
Like, what do you feel like people try to do themselves, and you're like, no, don't
yeah.
do that. Like, and then you come in and like,
Yeah.
what is the contrast between someone doing it themselves and then like the way you do it?
It's a good question, man. I feel like when somebody's doing it themselves,
Yeah.
they're gonna consume content on YouTube, aka watch my videos, but they're not gonna. There's no way they could take my video into consideration and not discount their context. So I'm making videos for the mass audience when I make videos like that on YouTube, and you might not fit into that the way I set that up in that space, in that room, in that window light, in that place, and that it's not as rectangular. It's actually more square. So there's so many nuances, and so what actually ends up happening is you end up wasting so much time in the research phase of trying to figure out what to buy. And you typically will buy the wrong thing, try to Frankenstein everything, and then realize that, like, dang, I spent all this money, and like I actually spent more money than I needed to probably.
Yeah.
And that's what I typically find I'm usually doing, is I'm saving people the headache of time and buying what they don't need.
Right.
And so it always, when I start the process of helping somebody dial in their setup or get their studio up and running, it usually starts with like, what are you trying to accomplish? And if somebody's like, dude, everything, I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna let you know, by you trying to accomplish everything, you're either gonna have to, drop down in quality because you're gonna need the convenience to be able to do it all, or you pay for that, you
Right.
know? And so the last person I helped was this guy named Lewis Howes, who has a podcast.
Oh, dope.
called
Yeah, School of Greatness.
Yeah, so he had a basement that he wanted to create a podcast setup, but he wanted a photo booth. He wanted to be able to do web classes from there and Zoom calls.
Like
with
all
his-
in one basement.
and he just wanted to be able to do everything.
Yeah.
And I had like doing everything takes some skill, and there's some some things and so by you telling me like all that you're trying to do and what majority you're trying to do, I then prescribe. It's kind of like a doctor, right? I prescribe a gear list based on what you're trying to accomplish, and then there's also the interior design element, right? Like, okay, we get the shots dialed.
And you help with that part too.
Yes.
Damn.
And so yeah, it's called Dialed in a Day. It's like a
Yeah.
full blown experience.
That's
I don't
dope.
really promote it.
Yeah.
It's because it's not scalable. I know it could be scalable, but it's not
Yeah.
what I'm focusing on scaling. But I do, for somebody who's willing to pay the 20 grand for my service and values their time, it's actually cool because I get paid to be in a relationship with somebody who values that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So then we usually grab lunch, and then we usually chop it up, and then we usually become friends.
That's dope.
And it's like they paid you to become
Yeah.
friends, and I would have loved to be your friend anyway.
Yeah,
you know, because
yeah.
you're a high level person
Yeah.
and you have something to offer. But yeah, I mean, I've helped. You know, there's this loan officer who owns a brokerage in California outside of San Francisco, and he just wanted it. He had an extra room in their office, and then we just dialed it in with a couple cameras and showed him how to use it. His assistant how to use it.
Yeah.
It really does. Like I loved making videos for the tech and all that stuff because it really helped a lot of people. I mean, I've amassed over 60 million views with that type of content and grown
like how-to type of videos.
Yeah.
Wow.
But there's nothing like just helping the one-on-one person or the person in a small context that really would value the information. Because none of us are trying to waste each other's time here, you know. And so when somebody values the information that I have to give, it's better for both parties. And I think there's not a better way to serve people than in an intimate setting like that, where they're literally getting the job done, and then also having the roadmap mapped out on like the how to be successful with this setup.
Yeah, 100%.
Now, some people do use this as an excuse to extend their action, though.
What do you mean by that?
Like sometimes what people, I mean, there's a lot of clients that I've worked with and have done this offer for, and they haven't even put it to use because
Really?
they thought by buying all the gear,
It'll make them take action.
it'll make them take action, and by buying the gear doesn't make the videos for you.
Yeah,
you know,
facts.
you still have to actually make the videos.
It's a lot of work.
And so there's a muscle outside of all this stuff
Yeah.
that needs to be worked on. And so I actually think when you're in a flow, like you can grow into getting a setup, you know, like something serious. But starting from zero to hero, the trend is typically they don't usually follow through and becomes consistent yet.
Yeah.
There's the consistency thing they still need to get over.
Yeah.
And that's regardless of using your phone or a camera.
Yeah. Just to like add on to this, because there's a lot of people like in the personal branding space that go, what's the difference between going and renting a studio and like having your own setup? Like, do you prefer having your own setup or renting it out, or like what's your opinion on like someone trying to make that decision?
Yeah, I think it's great to use a studio. Like if you had a podcast and you didn't want to like front all this money, the flip side is depending on where you are in your business, it might be wise for you to just buy it outright. And I actually think there's a huge opportunity for a lot of real estate agents and a lot of people who, like schools, churches, people with spaces that have space that's not being used. They could turn it into a cash cow.
Yeah,
by making it a rent. Yeah, you creating a studio, so you make it for yourself, but then locally people can then use it. So I mean, there's other ways to look at it, but yeah, I mean, you know, if it's $250 for you to shoot a conversation with somebody and somebody takes care of the edit and all that stuff, then cool. Somebody like me though, I do still think like if that's the only time you create, I feel like that should just be one part of it, you know, like so I still think everyone should still have some sort of a setup, especially if you're doing Zoom calls, if you're doing coaching calls, or if you're
like how important is, because Zoom is a part of everybody's like day-to-day operations.
Yeah.
Like, most people that do Zoom just open up their laptop wherever they are and boom, there it is. Like, what's your opinion on the difference between having a default wherever you are, however it looks like, versus a dialed in, like branded, like curated setup? Like, what do you feel like the difference is?
Well, you kind of just said it. You said everyone does this. So if you don't want to be like everyone, then you would just have a little bit of thought put into and that every time you talk or every time you show up, it's just a topic of conversation, or it might not even just be a topic of conversation. It'll just be a thing that people talk in their own mind. Yeah. Dang, he just sounds so dang good. Yeah. Or like, dang, her setup is really clean. That'll just, and if you could connect words like that to your face and your brand and your name, that's building a brand. Yeah. It's not just like outbound branding or content marketing. Yeah. No, it's like what people think about when they think about you. Yeah, it's your face value. Every time that guy shows up on a call, like he's just, it's put together. Yeah. It's the same concept as like if we were phase that we're in right now. Like in the olden days, the person that had just like a little bit of style, maybe everybody had business casual, but this person, like, you were looking forward to their outfits every day because they were intentional about it. And so it kind of speaks in the same regard that, you know, everyone's doing Zoom and everyone's just using their built-in webcams. Awesome. But if you have like a space where you actually work from, and it doesn't take much to just get it all dialed in a place where you get the wow factor and people just want to listen to you because you sound easy to listen to.
Man, that's so fire. I kind of want to shift conversations and go into like, bro, like podcasting, because you've started yours and I think you hit like insane numbers in a short amount of time. Like, if you were to give somebody the blueprint that worked for you, like, where do you start?
Yeah. No, I started a podcast just to prove that growing a YouTube channel isn't by luck.
Yeah.
So I played the YouTube game with my podcast. So when somebody says, hey, Omar, I want to start a podcast, I realize now, because I've helped so many people, that they're not asking, Omar, I want to start a podcast, or how do I start a podcast? It could mean so many other things. Omar, I want to start an interview show. Omar, I want to start an online virtual podcast. Omar, I just want to do a podcast audio only. Omar, I'm looking to start my YouTube channel. But all that comes in the question oftentimes, Omar, if you were to start a podcast, how would you start? You know? So I think first it's like deciding on what kind of podcast you want to start.
Right.
I prioritized the YouTube experience of my podcast.
What do you mean by that?
I prioritize the YouTube experience of my podcast by caring and putting so much effort and energy into the packaging of my conversation.
Got you. Okay.
So some people think that my podcast is cool because I got a lot of people that are known on it. I would argue that nobody knows most of my guests.
Okay.
I just know how to package their genius in a way that people are looking for their genius, and they don't know it's through this individual.
Wow.
Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
And I actually don't encourage people to build their podcast on clout. I like to say, like, if you try to build your podcast on clout, eventually it will run out. There's only so many people that you can invite and like have the stars align where we're both in the same city and we can actually make something happen.
Yeah.
And like for somebody who's really trying to build a media company, with the podcast being the driver of that media company, that makes sense. But for most people, no, you just need a way that you can concisely deliver information. But the way I prioritize YouTube is by obsessing over the title, making sure the thumbnail is connects and complements the title, and we put 90% of our energy into the intro of our podcasts.
Wow.
And so,
and how long typically is your intros?
Anywhere between 30 to 45 seconds, or 30 to about maybe 120 seconds. So but we try to stay under a minute, because on YouTube you want 60% of people who clicked on your video to stay past the 30-second mark. Okay.
So you gotta grab them right in the beginning.
And so, I mean, over the course of the last 7 or 8 months we've been doing the podcast, like I've come up with a formula for the intro of the podcast. But before I even would get into that, I would ask you what kind of podcast you're looking to start. I actually think most people should just start an audio-only podcast, because it's a giant to try and do the video thing.
Yeah, it's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work.
It's not
easy. It's a lot of work for me. Like it is an additional part-time effort in my week-to-week business. You know, that like the podcast is it takes time, because it's video, and but if I were to, I a lot of times I just set people free when I'm like, why don't you just grow an audio-only podcast? There's so much people that listen to podcasts audibly. I would say you could turn on a camera for the use of social content, but like the need to like feel like you need to do it right on YouTube. Because I feel like you can actually hurt.
But how do you capture listeners with an audio only podcast? Like, where do you even promote that?
Yeah, I mean, that's why I say you could turn on a camera and just clip up your podcast, but you're not spending the time to release the full length video version of that, But an audio-only podcast is by showing up consistently, and by growing your brand on other platforms like Instagram and posting content on there, and that like one of the ways people can just consume you in a longer format is through your audio podcast, and build your email list, and you send an email list. Like I mean, it's funny because like video podcasting is fairly new concept, right? Like audio podcast is still
Yeah. I actually listen to audio podcasts when I'm working out, like
right
on Spotify.
yeah, and a lot of times people get you discover a podcast because of a word of mouth,
Yeah.
or you discover a podcast because of a smaller clip from the podcast.
Right.
So I just know that like if you wanted to do it right, it just takes time and skill to do it right on YouTube. But I had the tools and resources, and I've been doing YouTube for you know however many years, 10 plus years, and so I knew what it needed to be in order to stand out. And I would even say it wasn't until the 10th episode that I really experienced, like my podcast caught the algorithm.
Yeah.
And then I just leveraged what that podcast, you know, how that intro was, and started to do my best to replicate a very similar version of that intro with the future conversations.
So what do you know now that you didn't know when you first started your podcast that you're implementing for like future episodes that you're doing?
What do I know now that I didn't know
when you first started your podcast like 6-7 months ago?
Well, what I would say is what I didn't know is that it would blow up my business.
Yeah, that's dope. What does that mean by blowing up your business?
I mean, I probably, I don't know, maybe had like around 30,000 followers on Instagram.
Right.
When I started the podcast, and like, you know, now I have 96,000 at the time of shooting this. And what I didn't know is that it was going to make being consistent easier.
Wow.
Right. Like, because like every conversation we get anywhere between 5 to 12 vertical clips.
Yeah.
What I didn't realize is that also I didn't realize that people were going to meet me on the podcast. There were some people that didn't know me at Think Media, but because I started a podcast, it showed up on their feed. They watched it. They love me. They follow me on Instagram.
Wow.
And they joined my coaching program. Like, it was a podcast. And what I also didn't know was just by associating yourself with individuals, because when a person doesn't know who somebody is, but then they learn who they are from the conversation, and you do that over time, and then it's like, whoa, like by association, my brand has gotten a facelift.
Oh, 100% branding by association. You're leveraging their credibility, their audience, all of that.
And then I'm learning now it's like the other way around, where like people are now leveraging my podcast, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
But that's what's funny. I get like put in awkward. Here's what I didn't know. I didn't know people would think, and I'm not an idiot, right? Like what I didn't know is people that would hit me up and say, "Hey man, I'm coming to Vegas. Would love to do your podcast." It's like, I never asked you.
Yeah.
I didn't know that, but I can see why they would think that. But that's just like a very awkward. And I have up to this point, for 99% of the podcasts I've done are all relational. Like I actually
so it's all intentional.
Yeah, relational also in the sense that like before I even had the podcast, we knew each other.
Oh, wow.
Because we were in the same rooms, because we've done certain things together, and you know, whether it was like being at a conference or, you know, same mastermind, or when nobody knew who I was, and I was just creating videos for other people, they knew of me then, and then they seen the evolution of Omar.
Oh, that's super dope.
And so yeah, just being in my bag for a while, you know, but like, I actually am not interested. I'm honestly, I'm not that interested in interviewing somebody I don't know, even though they're awesome, because I don't know how to pull out their genius, because I'm not that curious about them. I don't know them. And so when another thing that is happening that I didn't realize is people are trying to make podcasts happen. Like, hey, Omar, putting me in group chats. And it's like, dude, like, cool, thank you for doing this. But like, I mean, good night, dude.
Yeah.
If everybody did this, I wouldn't have a life. But like, hey, Omar, this person's coming into Vegas. I think you guys should do a podcast together. And it's like, okay, what? Like, so now I got to go look and learn about you and like all that stuff. And this is like, what am I? I mean, it might be a little bit selfish, but like, I get nothing from you being on by me not knowing you. Yeah. It just looks like more work.
Right. So do you feel like your genius, because your conversations are great. Like,
thank you.
I listen, like, you're one of the top 3 podcasts I think all of us here listen to it. Like, do you feel like your way of having the conversations you're able to have, it's because you actually, number one, you know them, you know enough to ask these right questions?
Yep.
Because when I interview someone,
I know enough. That's a good, I know enough.
Yeah.
So like this morning I did a podcast interview with these girls that are in the same mastermind I'm in.
Okay.
And I never had a full-blown conversation with them, but I follow them on social. I know what they do. They teach other women how to become better at sales.
Oh, are they the
sales girls?
Yeah, they're pretty dope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
sick.
so my like a lot of my preparation going into the podcast, I open up a notes app in my phone or a new note, and I just think about like what are the questions like when I wanted to get better at sales, or like what questions do I still have? You know, what do they think about Andy Elliott being like the face of sales on social media? In my opinion,
I can't wait for that episode.
You know, and so like there are things because I knew I wanted to have a conversation around the concept, idea, and skill of sales. That I can. From that, I can draw those questions, but it's also like I think it's curiosity and humility. Like I don't have this thing figured out yet. This thing called life, business, you know, whatever. And so if somebody knows something really well, or they're known for the thing, and they're really good at communicating that, it's a little easier to platform that you know genius or whatever that may be. So that we can maximize the reach of this conversation. Yeah,
and that makes sense. And it may not work for everybody. Some people are great at strangers, but some people like you are more like relational. Yeah. So maybe
100.
Do you feel like if you're more of a relational person, you stick to like that core value of like interviewing people that you actually care about?
I think there's an intangible care that gets communicated from somebody who has vetted interest in this conversation. Yeah. You know, I have a friend who has a podcast, and like, you know, sometimes he'll just do the podcast with somebody he just met right before. And there's a lot of people that do that, and it's cool. You can't unpack something, but I still like, sometimes he'll hit me up if he doesn't know the guest and he knows that I know a little bit about them, and I'll send him a 4 to 5 minute thing or 3 minute voice memo of what I think about this person from the perception they've put out based on my experience. And then like, bro, take that and run with it. So he still needed something going into it. Hey, I'm going to interview this person. What do you think about him, or what do you have on him? You know? So I mean, in some cases, like, yes, there are podcasts that it's like, you know, get whoever you can in. Yeah. But then I would just I just go back to the why. Yeah. Why is it just so you can get another upload? Yeah. Because then the other flip side is like, why don't you just do like a solo podcast? Yeah. Like my solo podcasts, they're not just me. I actually have my video guy Art on, and sometimes like somebody else, just to have, you know, the devil's advocate opinion about a thing I'm sharing. Right. But I'm just choosing the content format of a podcast to deliver strategy or what have you.
Yeah.
You know?
Man, I love that you're intentional, because like as you're talking about all this, I'm thinking like, dude, like, this conversation is a little different because I'm like thinking of questions I've always wanted to ask. Like that's been brewing as I've been watching your journey and your content. It actually feels just more, it's just easier to have a conversation when you're not thinking of questions. It's just like already in you. Right. Like, is that how you feel when you're having, like when you interviewed Chris Do, or when you interviewed, you know?
Yeah. So like going into Chris Do, okay, number one, I just knew that like Chris Do could talk about personal branding. That'll be the North Star of this conversation. Yeah. So what are the things people struggle with when it comes to personal branding? They struggle, or branding just generally speaking. Yeah. They struggle with how it looks. Yeah. They struggle with picking a niche. They struggle with like all these things that the way he would, you know, deliver on those ideas and questions was very Chris Do. Like when I asked him, I'm like, how do you become, like, how do you stand out? You know, if it's all about me. And then he was like, you don't stand out until you know yourself. Yeah. Go see a therapist before you start making videos.
That's a bar.
Yeah. and it was like, it's really good. But that was Chris Do's way of answering that. But that's why he's a thought leader in this idea. Yeah. And also being a consumer of his content, I know he addresses pricing and, you know, entrepreneurship and like how to value your work. Yeah. So I have the old Omar in mind, but I do take time to jot down notes on my phone, because there are moments where it actually we get to something I wrote down and it just happens. Yeah. And then there's times where it doesn't, and like
So you're actually taking notes while you're interviewing.
I don't know. Some people think I'm texting. Yeah. But I'm actually like they're mid breaking down something. Like today, one Kat from Sales Girl, she was just talking about how they have this framework when they teach sales, and then she's just telling the story.
And just like writing.
And I wrote down. Explain the framework. I just wrote that down. Yeah. So that when she got to the end of that, if I still had something to say, I could, and it could like settle and be like, so you mentioned framework. Like, what is the framework?
Yeah. Man, that's pretty genius to do that, like, while you're having the conversation.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's hard. It's honestly hard to think about where this conversation is going. Yeah. Be engaged, make eye contact for the most part, for majority of it. Still think about the audience and where they're at in this conversation. Like, because there are even times where I feel like, dang, this is kind of dragging out. Like, we need to move this move the conversation in a different direction.
Yeah.
But which is good. I mean, that like I have that, I guess you could say, intuition.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm an active listener. And I'm also I prepare.
Yeah.
You know, like I envision the podcast, I guess, before I even have it, if I know it's happening. Good. So yeah, like I'm thinking about a podcast that I might shoot tomorrow with the guy who's behind Earn Your Leisure.
Earn Your Leisure. That's
It's like these two guys that they have a million subscribers.
Okay. I think I've seen them on Shan's podcast.
Yeah, but they have a really big brand. I haven't really watched any of their videos. I just know that they have huge cultural impact in their community. And if this guy's the guy behind it, you know, and if we're trying to connect in the next couple of days while he's in Vegas, but I don't know him, I don't know what they're doing. Like I have to think about like how would this conversation matter? And it honestly might be, you know, building a media empire.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the conversation. Like I do know that's what the guys like Patrick Bet-David are doing.
Yeah.
They're building
they're building networks.
Yes, they're building networks. Yeah. And so this might be, what if, can he add to that conversation? He probably can, because they've done it.
Yeah.
And I've been a part of Think Media, so like that could be a cool dynamic. So like now I'm just doing all this thinking work before we even have this conversation.
Yeah.
You know, because I care most about this convo getting as much exposure as possible.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so yeah, I mean, what was another one? Like another one that I might be doing is, I forgot who it was, but yeah, I think, just long story short, like I guess take the little preparation I do, I realize isn't necessarily what most people do when they do podcasts. But people who do high level, I've seen Lewis do a podcast at the studio. He actually interviewed C-Bum, or like what's his name? Chris Bumstead, who's a 5-time Olympian bodybuilder guy.
Wow.
And Lewis had his laptop, and he had a bunch of notes, but because of the conversation and because he's a great conversationalist, he came prepared, Lewis, but he also he didn't have to refer to him too much.
Wow.
You know? And so
I think preparing yourself, I mean, I look at this podcast like a business. Like if you fail to plan, then you plan to fail. Like there's a lot of people in podcasting that, like, you could tell like they don't even know where to take the conversation.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't, dude, I'm super nice guy. I'd like to think, you know. And when I'm on a podcast, I'm not trying to consult, you know, like unless in the podcast we're looking to consult. If you're just like, bro, tell me about like how I can make my thing better, you know, like then we can go there.
Yeah.
But like, I mean, I had sometimes my students in my inner circle will want to do a podcast, and I'm always down for it. And my thing is always like, you got to get 10 episodes first. Show me that like you're taking this serious, and I'll be your 11th episode. So I even ask you, like, how many episodes you got? You're like 19. I was like, okay, he has a podcast, you know? But I remember getting introduced. He's like, yo, you know, Omar's the content guy, you know, just killing it, blah, blah, blah. You know, living in Las Vegas. How do you like living in Las Vegas? And I'm like, dang, dude, like, people who's listening to this conversation don't give a freaking crap about what I think about living in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
They give a crap about themselves.
Yeah.
So, like, how can you start it in a way? I always like to think, how can I start a podcast in a way that they get immediate value? And so usually it's by just defining something really quickly. Yeah. So like, hey, really quickly, Shalene, can you define what a personal brand is?
Ooh, I remember that when you asked her that question.
Because it just rolls into the thing. Yeah. I say, dude, she's accomplished a lot of stuff, but what is a personal brand to you? Yeah. You know, I did the same with Caleb Ralston, who's worked for Gary Vee and now works for Alex.
And is that like your formula for every guest? But you ask it
for the most part, yeah. Sometimes it can vary. Like today with the sales girls, I kind of introduced them, but because I don't know them, it really was like, how did you stumble into sales? Yeah. You know, and I think that might be the journey of a lot of people. They stumble into it because they clicked on a video or they you know, maybe sat through a conference or something and realized, and then they exposed. I had a moment at Starbucks, and she shared a story on like how how one of them stumbled on it, and how the other, you know, Kat and
that's good.
Yeah, Macy.
Okay, dang, you just gave some bars on like how to level up people's podcasts without even like knowing that you just did. Like that was pretty good. Sure. Man, so kind of like one of the things that I've seen you've done do over time is like raise your pricing. And like what's your thoughts on pricing as a creator? Because it's so different to look at like what you do in pricing versus like like a business coach, like someone who, you know what I'm saying, like
Sure.
helps build and create like business. Like you're hitting what you do from a different angles. Like what's like your philosophy on like how you structure your pricing?
That's really cool question, because like I mean like it's a never ending journey, right?
Yeah.
I realized like I sell the same thing right now that's going to be 25K, and I sold it for 2 when I first started, but it's essentially the same thing. It has been reiterated. I do have more proof and more testimonials and all those things, but I'm essentially selling the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so the question is, how did you know you can raise your price? And I think there's 2 avenues to that.
Okay.
The first avenue is that you yourself are a high level buyer or a quality buyer. You buy quality things. You invest in yourself. By me joining a over $50,000 mastermind,
It was Myron's, right?
yeah.
Okay.
It gave me the more confidence to charge more. Dude, if I'm willing to pay for this, I'm also like, it's giving me the confidence to be able to charge it.
Yeah.
And so people who just want to charge expensive prices just because they see other people doing it, but they themselves haven't invested in it,
There's a disconnect.
There's a disconnect, and you won't have a conviction when you tell your offer. There won't be.
Man, that's a bar right there.
Yeah, there won't be weight behind it. You know.
You said there won't be a conviction when you tell your offer. Dang.
Yeah. And so
that's good.
So that's one avenue, is like, if you want to charge more, you need to be more. Like, become more valuable, become more, skilled, become more at all that stuff. And then the second thing is actually just like growing in the skill. Like, I'll never charge more than what I'm not comfortable charging, like, and sometimes that comes through various conversations of people telling you need to charge more. But I have to be okay with the price. If I'm charging a lot and I know I am, but like, that's all that I know, I don't know that it actually, in turn gives back that same value or 10x the value, then you're just ripping people off at that point, right?
Right.
And so it has been a journey of growing. Like, I would say in 18 months, is that 20? Like, is that 20x or is that 10x? That's 10x.
It's a 10x.
10x the price in 18 months. But that came from so much of growth and belief, and belief in myself and my skills. And then I'd also say, when you could get really good at packaging an offer. Yeah. So I worked with a company for a long time that sold a course for $1,000 on teaching you how to do YouTube. And they sold that course for $1,000. I think they got, maybe over the course of 8 years, 15,000 people to buy this course. Damn. Which is amazing.
Yeah, it's a lot of people.
But then I have another friend who teaches YouTube faceless, and he teaches YouTube as a business, and he charges $30,000 for less.
Oh wow, that's 30x.
But what's the difference? The difference in it is in how you package what it is you're selling.
Right.
So he's selling a business in a box, whereas the other person is just selling information and education.
But it's essentially the same thing.
It's essentially the same thing. It's just how you frame it.
Dang.
So this is why learning sales and also learning the power of words.
Yeah.
I love what Myron says about it. He's like, he talks. He stopped me one time on a call. Because I said a word that he doesn't believe was correctly used.
Okay.
And
Do you remember what that word was?
Yeah, he's a big words guy. I said the word convince, and he was like, we didn't convince, we persuaded. There's a difference. When you convince somebody to buy something, you're making them buy it for your interests or think for your best interests. When you persuade somebody, it's in both parties' interests. Wow. So you don't convince somebody to buy, you persuade somebody to buy. Wow. And so he said, and the reason why this is important, Omar, he's like, because words matter. Actually, the Hebrew word for word is it when you back it up, it means matter, meaning it's like words are tangible. Wow. And so being intentional with your words. And I realize, as somebody who does coaching and consulting and has like I guess you consider a premium value offer, right? That I don't sell stuff, I sell words. That's all I'm selling. So like when I take people through my offer, if it's through my challenge, you're not selling
equipment. You don't have this crazy invention.
It's invisible. Yeah, I'm selling an idea. Yeah, but words are going to be the reason why people buy, and so being intentional about your intentionality behind the words you use is very important. As somebody who could charge more, you could charge more if you change the words you use. Hey, I got this thing on how to grow a YouTube channel. It's $1,000. Yeah. Hey, Have you ever thought about making an extra 6 figures with YouTube?
It's the same product. That's
same
crazy.
product. I could just charge $10K for this one.
Wow.
As opposed to $250 for this one, you know?
Yeah.
And so a lot of people who come to me, like I'm getting a lot of friends like ask me like, how do I start a thing? I had a friend who started he was like my old youth pastor, taught me how to read the Bible and biblical interpretation and all that stuff. And he wanted to start a preaching course. And I was like, don't do a course, do a program. Journey with people and like actually get them results.
Yeah, it's essentially the same thing.
Yeah, and like people would think it'd be crazy that he charged. I think he charged like $500 for it. I mean, and he's growing into the skill of charging more for it because he needs to see like what benefit it has. You know, I'm telling him like, dude, when the preaching gets better, the community gets better. When the community gets better, the city gets better. When the city gets better, the nation becomes better. You're helping the nation, bro.
Wow.
You know, and like when you see it that way, you're like, dude, this is important. You know, but yeah, I mean, he was able to make $12,000 in his first launch of his preaching,
sick.
You know, camp or whatever.
Wow.
And it's because a lot of people have the misconception of like selling what they have in their head,
right,
as opposed to selling a transformation people need.
Wow.
You know? And there's a difference on how you position it.
Man, that's so good how you broke that all down.
Yeah.
So
essentially, the reason why I charge more from like because I'm selling it as a means to doing more business.
Okay.
I'm not selling it as a means to become famous, right? You know, like or just become an influencer.
Yeah.
Like I could probably crush a program helping creators or content creators, but my thing is like content creators usually don't have anything to sell and they want to just sell merch or do brand deals. And that's a very long journey that I honestly can't guarantee that result, but I can guarantee a real estate agent, a coach or a consultant, you know, somebody who sells something very, very valuable that offers something, I could help you make more money because I can get your stuff in front of more people.
Right. So what are the 3 points that someone, if they want to step into this world of like using video to build their brand, to acquire more customers, what are 3 like main things that you would tell them to do?
Yep, it's really good. I think number 1 is just to pre-decide that this is the way to go.
Okay.
You can't see results by dabbling, but you have to pre-decide that creating content and videos, and content could also mean beyond video.
Okay.
I do love video because especially if you talk on video, people are getting your essence.
Yeah.
But also like copy and email and showing up on X or whatever it's called now, you know, like that deciding eliminates, the word decide is to cut off all other options. It means to cut, like decide. It's like that word when you break it down. So when you cut off all options, then you see like, okay, this is the thing. And so number 1 is just decide. Okay. And then the second is to use the next season for a season of discovery. Right?
That's good.
Like, don't do it for the result.
Yeah.
Do it for you getting better at it. Wow. Do it for to just get the process, the workflow, like how you're gonna become consistent. When it's about discovery, you're less hard on yourself because it's just like let's look to see let's do it like this for 90 days and like we'll revisit it and see what we would tweak after 90 days. You know. But we're doing this regardless because we decided. Right. But now we're just taking this next season to just discover.
That's good.
And then, you know, in the process of discovering, you're testing. You know, marketing is beta. I don't 100%. Think there's no such thing as a marketer or even like an educator like myself that knows exactly what to do.
Yeah, everything's a test.
Because it's always changing. Yeah. So yes, like everything's beta, you know, and so just like holding it with a loose hand and a loose grip and just being consistent. But do it for the discovery, and then at some point, I do think the next phase would be to like you could start delegating. You know, like delegating the uploading, or maybe delegating the edits, or delegating the filming. But I think that would be like the journey through it, and just at the end of the day, like always just be obsessed about who you're helping. That's what I mean. That's what I have found. Generally speaking, the ingredient for success with a lot of people that are in my world is obsession. And it's obsession about helping people with the problem they feel called to help the people with. It's also you get another word for it, could be care. You know, like one thing that would make you successful is by caring about the people you're serving.
Yeah, because then it shows in your content.
It shows, it feels like,
Yeah.
you know, people sense that stuff. And by caring, you actually get more, it rewards you by caring, because you're because I care so much, I'm better at listening to your problem. I'm better at, like, you know, taking into account what it is you need real help with. And it's because I care. It's not because I just want to get you something,
Right.
you know? So
No, that's good. I mean, there's a saying in business where it's like, people don't care how much you know, they care. People that they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
boom. Yeah,
And
that's it.
that rolls out in your content.
Yeah.
And just kind of go into content, man. Like, what? Because a lot of people right now, they're just trying to go viral. I think people are like, dude, how to go viral? Like, what do I? And they're just creating content to go viral. Do you think that's even a wise strategy to do?
No.
Ooh, people are about to get hurt right now.
Yeah.
Let's go, dude.
The reason why I don't think virality should be your goal
Okay.
is because how you are discovered is very important as to why somebody should stay and watch you forever.
Wow.
Right? So, Alex Hermosi just made a YouTube video, and honestly, I think, dude, he's the guy. He's the man, right? A lot of what he says is a trains of thoughts that I've been talking about for a long period of time. I also saw Mr. Beast uploaded a video last week where it was 10 minutes on the dot, and it was real time. Like, it was
Non-edited.
it was edited.
Oh, was it?
But it wasn't edited time-wise. There was no time taken out of the edit. It was, hey, we're starting this video. We have 10 minutes to start it. This guy's got to get here to here. And if he doesn't get in 10 minutes, then you're going to find at 10 minutes late at the end of this video. And the video is 10 minutes, you know? And I created a video that wasn't edited, and it was a video called Don't Edit Your Next YouTube Video, like over a year ago. Because I realized that, like, not all views are created equal. And so, like Alex was saying, he's like, dude, I've tested the entertainment, you know, content. I've made videos about fitness and food and my relationships and all that stuff. And he found that the people who watch the stuff where he's teaching from a stage or doing slide deck presentations, that it's so much more of a richer experience because they care about the information. When people are watching the entertainment stuff, they don't care as much. They're not, because they're looking to just be entertained. So if I'm building something that is about, you know, providing transformation for somebody in some capacity, and they just see me as an entertainer, it's gonna be really hard to charge them money, charge them for it.
That's good.
So if going viral is the goal, then the game you're playing, it's backwards, because it's like
sustainable.
It's not sustainable.
Yeah.
But then the people that find you aren't gonna be customers anyway.
They just care for the little entertainment.
They just care for the entertainment. And that's the funny thing about, like, when people scroll on social media, they're in a mindless state. And so if the overarching theme of what it is you do is attributed to just giving really good value and framing concepts that are maybe complex for other people, and you make it, you know, achievable, you make it accessible, you make it attainable, and you make it attractive, then people are going to want to stick around and follow you for more, you know? After I did the podcast earlier today, I did a podcast for them, and it was just enlightening how she said, like, every time you show up on my feed, I want to hear what you have to say.
Wow.
And that is built not from trying to go viral every post.
Yeah.
That is built from being intentional about that every piece of content that goes out is serving the person I want to serve.
Got you.
And in doing so, most people who are content creators or, you know, entrepreneurs that produce consistent content, they will agree with this statement, that the videos that went viral were videos they didn't plan on going viral.
Wow.
It was just by being consistent.
Yeah.
And then I had no idea that this video was going to be the one that would get a
So
lot of views.
So when you produce your content, it's just based off value. It's not based off trends or based off...
It's based on principle. So I, like, the things I shared on, like, what I do, like, I just stick to the principle. And sometimes the principle pays off in the form of views, and sometimes the principle pays off in the form of like feedback or whatever, you know, like, so that, I mean, there is a term though. I love that, like, his name is Brock Johnson. He's like the #1 teacher of Instagram. He's actually the son of Chalene Johnson, but he says that, you know, create content that would be viral for you. So he says VFM, viral for me. Because if you're a real estate agent and you made a video about this neighborhood and its parks and all that stuff, and that video got 5,000 views, and you got 5 leads from that video, and the houses in that neighborhood are 500,000, that's viral, dude.
Yeah.
You don't need 1 million views.
That's good.
I don't need to dance, you know.
Yeah,
like,
that's good.
And even if, like, who's gonna give money to a person that dances?
Yeah.
Like you're not a stripper. No, I'm just kidding. But like people are like kind of like that's what they're kind of doing. They want to be paid to entertain.
Yeah.
I would rather be paid to educate because the person that teaches the thing usually makes more money than the person that does the thing.
Facts.
And so I get paid more as a content creator because I teach content creation than most content creators actually make from just making content.
Man, that's so
You know
good.
what I'm saying?
Dude, you've been giving gems on this podcast. I like the viral for you because it takes the weight off your shoulders. Like,
For sure.
How do I get to the world where you just need your backyard?
Yeah.
Like, I think that could even work for like even someone who services the world, like has a global business. Like, you don't need to go viral for the world.
No.
You just got to go viral for your niche.
Yeah.
And viral for your niche isn't millions of views. It's 5,000, 10,000.
Yeah, it's the right views.
Yeah,
it's getting the right audience and them seeing the right information. And I'm working with a guy one-on-one who owns a merchant services company, meaning like, you know, he swaps out your registers and all that stuff. And like it took us a while for me to actually get down to the meat of what it is he actually does and sells. Because at first it's like, yeah, dude, talk about PayPal versus Stripe and like why you should have your own merchant services customized thing. And at some point that's very narrow, and he should make those videos because he could. Mm-hmm. But when we got to talking, I was like, what's your business model? And he was like, yeah, dude, like, I mean, if you wanted to start your own merchant services company, you would just come through me. And then I'd give you everything you need to know. And like, it's one of the best business models because it has reoccurring revenue. Mm-hmm. Anytime you land a client, you're going to get paid for eternity until they change. They most likely won't if you just do your job and make sure they're served and happy. So he's like, yeah, I got this girl. She joined in December, and she's on track to make like $200,000 this year. I was like, she just joined in December. I was like, how much did it cost for her to join? And she's like, nothing. She just, she was a fitness trainer, and she just wanted to start doing this. And I was like, okay, so it costed her nothing, and she had a network of people, and now she's going to make an extra $200,000 this year, residually every year, because she worked with you.
Wow. And
he was like, yeah. I was like, bro, your content is selling this promoting this as one of the best ways to start a business. Like, you should be advocating start a merchant services thing as opposed to becoming a real estate agent, as opposed to starting a clothing brand, whatever like other people think who are looking to get in business. So now your content has mass appeal because you could talk to the person looking to the side hustle person.
Yeah. And has he switched that content strategy and is doing that now?
Yeah. And now it's about like actually dialing in his funnel because like he didn't really have like a funnel for it. It was just by happen chance that he would get people.
Yeah, you definitely need systems.
But what's crazy is like that unlock.
Yeah.
While we had a sit down one-on-one, I mean, I was like, now you could charge $15,000 to get in your. It's not even a program yet, but now it's a program. It's $15,000. They get your mentorship, and they get access to a business model that like could change their lives.
Yeah.
Wow. And he's like, dude, my goodness, like I can make a lot of money doing that because he does. He was like overdoing like the work. Like he's tired of like doing his own client work, and he'd rather just like mentor people.
Yeah.
And so what's funny about that is like. When he told me that, I'm like, well, then the content we were going to start with probably isn't, because that's going to attract other business owners to work with you, as opposed to you make the business owner.
Wow. Man, that's so good.
But it's a lot of deep work.
Yeah.
And this is my ability to do this has only been because I myself I've grown so much as a business owner, somebody who's like, architected offers multiple times and dialed in my offers and then how to present it and finding different ways to get people to hear it and also my curiosity. Yeah. Like I genuinely was like, dude, I want a merchant services company.
Right.
Like, what am I doing? I'm doing the wrong business, dude. Like, talk about like your effort. I was like, what kind of business has the same effect? He's like, there isn't.
Yeah.
I'm like, you have an irresistible offer.
Wow.
And so, but now your content has more broad appeal.
Yeah.
And so like, I think it's a lot of deep work. Sometimes people aren't necessarily even ready to be the expert. I mean, some people are trying to be expert too soon.
Yeah.
As opposed to just like you can always share the journey. Everybody has the permission to share your journey and your progress and what you're doing, but like you don't have to be an expert if you're not.
That's good.
Yeah.
But for those who are experts, I think the way you said it's just how you frame it, how you change like. your words.
Right. And
are
I would say if you
valuable.
are the expert, you would
Yeah.
actually see that path.
Oh yeah.
Because you'd be like, oh, now I get it.
Yeah.
Because I've been helping people and I realize that they've been saying this. And like, so yeah, like, I mean, and that's why I love helping people who self-identify that they are really good at what they do.
Yeah.
If you believe that,
Right.
I can help you.
Right. No, that's good. I think everyone who is that could get so much from this podcast. And I'm just want to be mindful in time, dude. There's one question I always ask, like as I wrap things up, is if you like, God forbid anything happening, but like if you weren't in this world anymore and your content's gone, but there's like a piece of paper with one line on it, it's like framed in the Hall of Heroes of YouTube or whatever. Like, what would that paper say for you?
Repeat the circumstance. Like I lose everything.
Okay, so like there's there's nothing of yours, like no YouTube, no podcast, like no one
knows who I am.
Knows who you are, can't Google you. There's nothing except for a piece of paper with one line on it that's like framed in the Hall of Heroes for the rest of eternity. Like, what would you put on that paper?
That's a gnarly question, and I like the first thing that comes to mind is probably it sounds inappropriate. Because here's the first thing that comes to mind, but I'm gonna give you what I think it should say. Okay. You know, because you said eternity, and that changes everything. If it wasn't eternity, it would say make more videos, but that could just be taken in so much different context. They're like, make videos, bro. Like what? OnlyFans, bro? You know? Okay, Omar, chill. You're a pastor. It would probably be a scripture.
Okay.
And that phrase would probably be one of my life verses, which is Ephesians 2:8. For it is by grace you've been saved, not out of your works, so that any man can boast. But salvation's a gift from God.
Wow.
And so that's what it would say.
That's bar.
Or maybe it would say Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. One of the two.
Okay, that's good, man. Yeah, we didn't even get to go into faith, but I mean, yeah, he's a pastor. He's legit. But man, I appreciate this. For everyone just like watching, I'm gonna recommend just go back because there's so much in here to unpack and tap in with Omar. I say this to every podcast, like be in proximity, even if you're not in Vegas, follow him, listen to his podcast, join his inner circle. All the links will be right under this, wherever this podcast is on. And bro, thank you for pouring into this.
Heck yeah, dude. Thank you for having me on. It was super fun.
Boom.